As we get closer to the beginning of the 2023 NFL season, I've been trying to cover as many rookies as possible and spotlight their careers, why they're getting talked about, and who they are. One of the few quarterbacks I haven't talked about was, in my opinion, the most underrated quarterback who is not getting talked about at all. Unfortunately, in the middle of editing this video, I found out that Jake Haener was just suspended 6 games, but nonetheless, the guy is still a steal, has a tremendous story, and when he gets back, could do a lot of damage for the New Orleans Saints. In today's video, we're going to spotlight Jake Haener. We're going to go through his insane rise, his crazy college career, and why he could be the most underrated quarterback from this year's class. But before we get started, quickly be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football content, and let me know what player, team topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Jake Haener. So going back in time, Jake Haener grew up in the state of California. Like many California kids, playing in the Rose Bowl was a dream destination for him, but he also had another Pac-12 school that he had family ties to. Both his mother and grandfather ended up going to Washington, so he was a Huskies fan as a kid. Growing up in Fresno, the Haener family was in solid shape, but Jake wanted his own legacy. He said, quote, "My dad didn't come from a lot. He grew up in Fresno with a middle-class family. They did really well for him growing up, and both my parents worked extremely hard to provide for me and my brother. I didn't want to ride the coattails of their last name, and I wanted to make my own name and do everything the right way, and show people how consistent I could be as a leader and as a person." His mom was a local TV anchor, and like his mom, Jake loved film, but in the football sense. His mom said, quote, "He's a football junkie. He's constantly watching films, studying tendencies, and he loves it. He loved the quarterback spot as well, and molded his game after a certain player. He said, quote, "I always wanted to be like Drew Brees. He was my role model growing up with the way he handled himself and the type of leader he was and how he played with timing, anticipation, and accuracy." Early on, Jake Haener was a pretty talented quarterback, as the first memory from his local coach Craig Berman was when his team was finishing up practice one day and some local youth kid took the field. He said, quote, "They'd be coming on to start when we were done. He'd always say, 'Coach, watch me throw.' I watched this little tiny guy in 6th or 7th grade, and man, he could throw even back then." He would eventually get to high school, and he followed a great lineage of QBs who went on to play college football. This included Kyle Wright, who went to Miami, Brett Nottingham, who went to Columbia, and Jeff Locke, who went to Oregon. He ended up being next in line, plus he was a super tough kid, and one story would actually humble him for good as a sophomore. Apparently, Haener always had excuses at practice for why he made bad decisions, and one day coach decided to let him have it. Haener said, quote, "Coach hates yeah but. I said yeah but one too many times, and he had me running around the track for 30 minutes. After that, I never said those 2 words ever again." This led to a lot of on-the-field success, as in his first 3 years, Haener threw for 5,721 yards with 57 touchdowns and only 16 interceptions. Specifically, his junior year was insane, as he had over 3,000 yards and 35 scores, and he led his team to a 7-4 record, and they reached the Division I quarterfinals. This led him to becoming one of the better quarterbacks in the state, and he was starting to get national recruiting attention. He had a total of 10 offers at this time, and definitely could have gotten more, but he chose to commit early to his, quote, "dream school." That was Washington. Haener also had offers from Colorado State and Utah State, and said family played a very important role in why he wanted to attend Washington. He said, quote, "My mom went there, my grandfather went there, and I have a ton of family in the area. It's my dream school and where I've always wanted to go, so when Coach Peterson offered me, I didn't waste any time committing." He also credits Peterson's coaching of Kellen Moore, who was also undersized, and crazily enough, at the time, Jonathan Smith was actually the Huskies quarterback coach, and he's the one who also helped get him there. If you don't know, Jonathan Smith is the head coach at Oregon State. He now wouldn't have to worry about recruiting and could finish out his high school career on a high note. You could say he put on a show. In total, he threw for nearly 9,000 yards with a school record 90 touchdowns and 24 interceptions. He still wasn't that big of a deal though, as according to 24/7 Sports, Haener was a 3-star recruit, the number 25 pro-style quarterback, and the 622nd best player in the class of 2017. So, how would he end up doing at Washington? Well, let's take a look. After becoming a backup in 2017 for Jake Browning, he would get a chance to develop and play a little bit more in 2018. It ended up being really tough for him, as he only came up in mop-up duty, and Huskies fans remember one play. He had a 37-yard pick six in a 12-10 loss against Cal, and afterwards it got so bad that he deleted his social media account. He said, quote, "You get a lot of things after the game, and you try not to pay attention to it, and all this stuff is popping up on your phone in messages that aren't the best mentally to deal with. I was a 19-year-old kid at the time, trying to just deal with it and really experience college football for the first time." Going into 2019, he would have some competition at Washington as they brought in former 5-star and Georgia quarterback Jacob Eason. The two battled it out all summer long, and near the end of camp, they had a scrimmage, and whoever was the best there was going to win the starting job. Haener said he threw a touchdown pass at the end, and the team jumped on him, and he thought for sure he was going to win the job. Next day he found out that he was not going to be the guy. The competition was extremely close, but Chris Peterson went with Jacob Eason. Peterson said, quote, "Jake Haener and Jacob Eason are obviously two good quarterbacks. It was a tight competition, and you take it as long as you can, and you have to make a decision and roll with it. Jake Haener will play in that first game. He deserves it, and he will." Well, it didn't work out too great for Chris Peterson, as a day later, Haener ended up entering the transfer portal. He said there were no hard feelings, but he didn't know when Eason would leave, and he wanted to at least start a couple of years, so he decided to leave. Eason ended up having one decent year before he went on to the NFL and never really did much. Eventually, 10 schools started to come after him, which included Baylor and Kansas State. Except everyone knew where he was going to go, as he had known Fresno's coach Jeff Tedford since he was 11 years old, and pretty quickly he found that he liked the fit, and 11 days after entering the portal, he resurfaced at Fresno State. How did Haener do at Fresno State? Well, let's take a look. He had to sit out 2019, and he had gone to Fresno State particularly for Tedford, but after he decided to step down, Kalen DeBoer was promoted to head coach, and now he had a decision to make. Luckily, the two clicked, and Haener decided to stick around. Going into the 2020 season, Haener was named the starting quarterback, and Kalen DeBoer was super pumped to have him. In case you don't know, Kalen DeBoer is now the head coach at Washington and has done a marvelous job developing Michael Penix, but Haener was his first project. In a shortened 2020 season, Haener would appear in 6 games. Against Colorado State, he had over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against Utah State, he had over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. And against Nevada, he had 485 yards and 3 touchdowns. He finished the year on a high note against New Mexico, and in a shortened season, finished with over 2,000 yards with 14 touchdowns and 5 picks. Going into the 2021 season, Haener was only going to improve. He got them off to a blazing start, but his most memorable performance would come in Week 4 against UCLA. Against the number 13 Bruins, they were trailing late in the fourth quarter, and Kalen DeBoer walked up to him and said, quote, "How do you want to be remembered? Because this is how Bulldogs fans are always going to remember you." Well, he ended up leading them down the field and scored, but he got hit so hard and hurt so badly that he was in so much pain and could barely move. After UCLA scored a touchdown, things were looking dim. Except at 14 seconds left, Haener threw a back shoulder pass to Jalen Cropper, and they won 40-37. The journey to that moment was a long time, and after that, Fresno State was in the top 25 for the first time since 2018, and Haener was on top of the world. He continued playing well, as the following week he threw 5 touchdowns and won over UNLV, then had 3 more against Hawaii, and in the final game of the regular season, had 4 against San Jose State. They'd end up having a breakout season in which they went 9-3, and they would play UTEP in the New Mexico Bowl. In that game, he threw for 1 touchdown and finished the year with 4,000 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 9 picks. After the season was over, things almost really changed. Kalen DeBoer took the head coaching job at Washington, and Haener was all set to go. He said he was going to follow him, and I can't remember if he did formally announce he was transferring there, but at the end of the day, he ended up sticking it out with Fresno State, and Washington got Michael Penix instead. 2022 was still a tremendous season for him, as he had a couple of big games. He had nearly 400 yards against San Diego State, had 4 touchdowns in a win over Hawaii, had 3 in a win over UNLV, and then had 4 against Nevada. He also helped them get to the Mountain West Championship game, where they beat Boise State 28-16. They'd end up qualifying for the LA Bowl, where they would play against Washington State and win 29-6. In Haener's final outing, he threw for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. For the season, he finished with 2,896 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 3 picks. It would have been a lot better, but he missed 3 games with a high ankle sprain, and there really wasn't much he could do except play through it. Haener said he was advised to shut it down and prepare for the draft, and he said, quote, "They told me 10 to 12 weeks and surgery, but that didn't resonate with me." He ended up leading them to the Mountain West Championship game, the MVP award in the Senior Bowl, and had a great performance at the Combine. So you could say it ended up working out for him. Haener set passing records at Fresno State, as in total, he threw for 9,128 yards with 68 touchdowns and 18 picks. He's now headed to the 2023 NFL Draft and was seen as a mid-round quarterback. What did the scouts have to say? Well, he said, quote, "Well, he doesn't have ideal height, weight, speed prototype, and he doesn't have a bazooka for an arm, but he gets the ball out on time, on target, and has proper touch, and he's been successful wherever he's gone." There was always a stigma around shorter quarterbacks, and with Haener playing in the Mountain West, some doubted him, but he was used to it. He said, "I've been fighting the naysayers and the doubters forever. I just love proving people wrong, and it's part of my DNA, and that's not going to change." He was seen as a mid-round pick and was constantly compared to a 2022 drafted quarterback in Brock Purdy. He said he got unbelievably tired of it, and he was constantly compared to Purdy. Haener ended up getting drafted a lot higher than Brock did, as he was taken with the 127th overall pick in the 4th round. Ironically, it was by the New Orleans Saints, and this was the same team that his role model Drew Brees played for. He was the 6th quarterback taken in this year's draft, and the first to hear his name called on day 3. He definitely has potential as a prospect, but Saints assistant general manager said it was smart business getting him. He said, quote, "We tossed a lot of these things around, like the idea of having a young developmental quarterback learn a new system with Derek and Jameis Winston." Haener had been solid throughout the last few months, had a couple moments of brilliancy in the preseason, and was definitely going to be that developmental quarterback, but as I was editing this video, we found out he's going to have a 6-game suspension. He's going to get some fines, and I guess he broke the NFL rule on performance-enhancing substances. I have absolutely no idea what it was, but Haener will be eligible to return on Monday, October 16th, and that will be after their Week 6 game against Houston. From there, Haener will end up being one of the backups, and unless things go absolutely crazy, he's probably not going to see the field for a while. Maybe he'll get some mop-up duty, but all in all, Haener is supposed to be a developmental prospect, and he is someone who works hard, has succeeded wherever he's been, and will not back down. We'll have to wait and see if it ever turns into an NFL career, but Haener definitely is an underrated quarterback prospect. But what do you guys think? If you're a Washington, Fresno, or Saints fan, what do you think of Jake Haener? Who's another rookie I could take a look at in my next video? And what other topics should I cover on the channel? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you're going to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.